Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, where we are trading based on the crazy volatility of yesterday that skyrocketed as high as 55%, maybe even higher. We'll have to ask Pete. We've got the 411 for you on the Rebel's Edge. Bang!
All right, we're stacking and packing, baby. We've got a lot of these now back there, John. It's pretty awesome. We continue to move forward. And I'll tell you what, our viewership's going up, which is a good thing.
That's right, folks. We're closing in on 100,000 here. So stay tuned. A lot more to come. And for those of you who are paying attention, the market was down 1,000 points yesterday. That's over 3%. And the VIX, which we're going to wait and let Pete hit that in Fantastic Futures, the VIX exploded.
Woo.
And a little trader by the nickname of 50 Cent might have made close to $100 million. We'll have that and a lot more here on the Rebel's Edge. But let's start off, Pete, with the macro minute and say global markets, significant volatility. We had a big rebound in Japanese equities. And let me just say this first, Pete, that folks, when something goes down 12.5%, it takes a lot more than 12.5% to the upside to get back to where you were because you're coming off of a lower base. Now, most of you who have done math know that, but those of you who have not are going to be surprised that the tremendous rebound, and it was a tremendous rebound overnight, still left the Japanese equities over 1,000 points away from where they were on Friday, the last traded day for the Nikkei 225. So I'm going to say macro, Pete, is the market's stabilized, at least for now, and we'll have to see whether or not they can continue that stabilization.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily surprised by the stabilization, John, but we had a lot of different factors that you could go to say, well, this is the reason it sold off. This is the reason it sold off. This is the reason. I think you got to look at the Nikkei as one of the biggest of them all, and that was definitely pulling on markets because look at their move, right? As you said, you're getting hit by about 13%. That's a real number. And even if you come back 13%, that's a lower number. That's just the way it works, folks. But that being said, we did have a nice recovery. We're starting to have an even better recovery today as we're looking at the markets. I mean, down 1,000 points plus on the Dow, and then you're looking over at the S&P that was just getting hammered. We're seeing a pretty nice rebound. We're not back all the way. Matter of fact, we're only a fraction of the way back. But nonetheless, at least we are seeing a lot of positives, a lot of buyers, and the market's sort of, as I think stabilized would be a perfect word, but I'd also say a lot of opportunistic buying as well, John.
Well, if you had dry powder yesterday on the opening or pre-market was a great time to use it. All right. And by the way, folks, we're going to be doing a volatility emergency meeting tonight for free. So if you'd like to join us, go on over to marketrebellion.com and sign up for it. We'd love to have you. Some 3,000 of you have already signed up. We can handle as many as 5,000 of you. So come on over, sign up, go to marketrebellion.com and look for the Volatility Summit or Volatility Emergency or something like that. Yeah. All right. Now let's talk, Pete, about Fantastic Futures. I'm going to let you lead off with your pal 50 Cent because back in early July, just after the 4th of July holiday, 50 Cent, man or woman, we're not sure. We know that's a man. Shot 9 times, by the way, I think. But 50 Cent is the nickname of this particular trader, not because they know it's a man, but because that's how much the person, whoever it is, pays when they come in to buy VIX calls, whether they buy them outright or whether they buy a spread. And July 8th, they bought a spread, right, Pete?
They bought a spread, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday. I think it's smart to hit it once again today, John. Take a look at that. That doesn't seem so bad. They were buying the 25s out in September. They were selling the 45s. It's a $20 spread. It seemed ridiculous, though, John, because how could it possibly get there when we've got the VIX stuck in the 12s back then? It was 1250, by the way. And then all of a sudden we got into that next range where we finally popped out of that. And the next range was, call it 15 to 19, more closer to the 17 and 15 range than it was 19, but it would pop up there occasionally. Well, we've had an absolutely explosive move. And you were right. In the pre-market, however, and I know that's not as liquid, in the pre-market, it was interesting to see exactly where it was. 65 was where it was. So that's a big number, big healthy number. It was a lot closer to 50 once we started getting into the day. And as we progressed through the day, despite the fact that those numbers got progressively worse and basically closed near the lows of the day, the volatility kind of settled down a little bit, John. It was a lot closer to, call it 35. Let's just say that. This morning, we're sitting there. We wake up. It's closer to 27. Right now, we're talking about underneath 26. Why is that? It's something that we talk about all the time, but volatility, that's how it works. It's got to have that consistency, that movement, and that volatile sort of range that you're going to find. And that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing it kind of tampered down, and it's certainly getting helped today by basically the S&P getting up almost 100 points and the Dow up about 500 points, and then looking over at the NASDAQ up about 300 points. All of that helps. The VIX is a measure of the S&P, but nonetheless, all of that helps when you're looking at that volatility index.
And I'm going to throw in, Pete, that the European construction activity, we got their so-called PMI for Germany, and it came in at 40. Remember, anything 50 or higher is expansion. Under 50 is contraction. So they're at 40. France is at under 40, and Italy's at 45. So three of the biggest economies in Europe, Germany obviously the biggest, but then followed by France and Italy, they are not seeing positive results out of their construction industry. And just like ours, folks, construction is the largest employer. So when you have construction basically shuttering to a stop almost, that is not good for those economies. It's not good when it happens here. And we're going to keep our eye on that. Pete and I were talking about that out in Vegas when we did our keynote. All right, let's talk for a minute, Pete, about Uber, because Uber came out and put out some Uber good, Uber as in a lot. That's what it means in German, I think. Uber Technologies, notable to the upside today. They came in and basically had earnings of 47 cents versus 31 cents a share. That's good. We've had a number of buyers in the past, but unfortunately, all of those were July buyers. So they missed this move, Pete. But today, it is making a nice recovery after a hit that virtually every stock, almost without exception, took yesterday.
Yeah, they put up some amazing numbers, John. When we looked at them, we were both awfully impressed. They talked about their bookings. They talked about all this stuff. And the year-to-date improvement that you're seeing over there is somewhere between 16, 18%. That's pretty damn good. So everything about Uber and what they talked about, including the outlook, looked extremely good. So I think that's obviously what the catalyst is. It's up over 8% today. The volume turnover is absolutely extraordinary. They traded 21 million shares in the first 90 minutes. So it's been very, very active, sitting right now close to $64 on a very nice, solid move to the upside. And this is probably, if going back in my mind anyway, one of the better that Uber has had in a very long time. And it's pretty impressive. There's obviously shorts there too. Sometimes they get scrambled around, but this one's less about a short squeeze, in my opinion, this time. It's about the numbers. These numbers were pretty extraordinary.
They were, and deservedly so. Uber's getting that lift today. No pun intended, lift. All right, Pete, TGTX. This is a drug maker. They're TG Therapeutics. What do? Well, they had a very positive result, Pete, for their Briumvi. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, but how the hell do people pronounce these weirdo drugs? Let's just say it's an MS drug that they give you a 1 hour infusion, I believe just once a year, Pete. And it's for MS treatment. You and I both know some people that have that, Pete. And this is a lifesaver, changes their lives, makes life feel a lot better for those folks. And TGTX is getting a nice pop from the positive statements made by a number of people, including their CEO.
Yeah, it's up 23%, or at least it was last I looked. It could be a little bit less than that right now. But when you look at that, you start to look, in this case, John, not only some good news that they've got out there, but they also have pretty substantial amounts of shorts. We're talking about 20+% on the short side of this as well. So it's a combination, again, good news. You've got some shorts there. They beat on the sales that they had, John. They also raised the guidance, and they lowered their expenses. I mean, this, again, very, very impressive. That's why this stock is pretty close. It's not at the 52-week highs, but it's very, very close to those 52-week highs. It's a really, really great report, I think, in just about every way that you could imagine. They don't have a lot of depth, but they've got a few different treatments that are sitting there right now, John, ready to go in the pipeline. So that's something as well. But they're earlier stage. This is truly about this MS drug, the efficiencies that they've been able to do, and why, and the fact that this thing is absolutely crushing it right now.
Yeah, and the turnover is huge in the stock today, folks, as you would expect. All right, Pete, Palantir, PLTR. Now this one, wow, significant jump to the upside in price. How much? Well, shares are up $3, which is about a 13% move, Pete. The turnover, 64 million shares already. 43 million is normal. So this is a very, very strong report. People are pretty bulled up about the report, and for good reason. They're applying AI. They're growing faster than people thought. And this is I think, one of the real winners in AI for actually the use cases of it, Pete.
Yeah. Well, they've done a great job, John. And then you look at them fundamentally, that looks pretty solid. The balance sheet looks great. You have free cash flow of almost $560 million. That's also very good. And then you raise your guidance. Obviously, we talk about that anytime we're talking about earnings is, okay, it's great to see. Oh, they beat on the earnings? Great. They beat on the revenue? Great, which is exactly what happened with Palantir. They also had the great guidance. So with the combination of all of that, makes a lot of sense why you're growing, and you're also, again, near those 52-week highs, up about 11%. Pretty strong results, John, I think, across the board. I look at this one. The only thing, if I were going to point at anything that I thought was a negative here, it's a little bit stretched on the PE. And this is something that we brought up about Apple not long ago. Apple had been a PE, price to earnings. It used to be in the low 20s, call it 20, 22, somewhere in there. That stretched up towards 30, 33, something like that. Gets a little bit more expensive, in other words. That's kind of what we're seeing here. But everything else in the report is great. It does, I think that's the only thing I would caution people is the PE is pretty high still. So something to keep in the back of your mind if you're looking at Palantir.
Well, what about ZoomInfo then, Pete? Zoom, synonymous with how we all got together, either just with our friends or business meetings, whatever it might have been during the pandemic. Well, if you look at where this stock peaked, ZI, back in the pandemic, you see a pretty much straight down, Pete, from the upper left to the lower right. Again, as our friend Dennis Gartman used to love to say, except he usually would like to talk about lower left to upper right. This is the opposite, upper left, lower right, just falling apart. It's down 17%, Pete, new 52-week high. I don't know if the stock's ever been lower than this. I'll try to get you an answer as Pete tells us what he thinks of the stock, but this was just a horrible report out of Zoom Information Technology, Pete. Adjusted earnings, 17 cents for the quarter, 7 cents worse than the estimate. So it's almost 30% worse than what the street was looking for.
Yeah, this is exactly the opposite of some of the other names that we've talked about today, John, where instead of it being, you can't imagine how it could be any better, you almost can't imagine how this could be any worse. It's why it's at those 52-week lows that you talked about. 775 is where they were. That's the 52-week low established today. It pushed up against that on a couple of occasions. It's not far off of that level now. And they also have a few other things outside of just the numbers that we talk about. We talk about they missed on earnings. They missed on revenue. Revenue was also down 6% year over year. All of that, of course, is negative, negative, negative. How about the fact that the CFO is stepping down? And now they're going to change that out as well. I mean, they can't get up more negative stuff at once. They probably just figured, you know what? This is a kitchen sink type of a quarter. We're going to throw everything at them. So they're going to be moving things around there too in the C-suite. The guidance, well, that was even below expectation. So you just can't find anything here that would tell you to say, you know what, I'm pretty convinced that somebody screwed up. This thing's ready to go. I don't think that's the case at all. This is a stock that's getting punished, and I think punished for all the right reasons.
Yeah, it's something we all use, probably. Many of you use Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or any of these alternatives, GoToMeeting, which, by the way, Pete, I'll be using GoToMeeting later in the week because somebody still uses that, I guess, and they sent me a link for it. But the fact that people used this and used it and were expected to convert into paid users, it's just not happened, not to the extent that it needs to. They signed up 37 new accounts of 100,000 or more. 37. That's not a lot compared to the amount of people that use this thing, Pete. That's 3.7 million the way I do math. So I'm going to say, yeah, doesn't justify the valuations that they have. All right, folks, take a look at this. Pete and I love sharing these videos with you. And we have yet another one. And this one, Pete, you had talked about Milton. Now, Milton is the taller player in this picture. The other player is a player that was drafted in the first round ahead of Mr. Milton, who was a 6th round pick. Now, let's listen to what Colin says about this, Pete, and see if you agree.
Sounds like it's not going well in New England. According to Michael Hawley, somebody I know, trust, and respect.
He's one of the best, by the way.
Two recent practices. I wanted him to be Justin Herbert and Josh Allen because those are the comps. Herbert. But what I saw was the ghost of Mac Jones. There's another story that Joe Milton, he was the quarterback, fun to watch from Tennessee, 6th round. They drafted 2 quarterbacks. That Milton has a wow factor, big, stronger arm than
athletic.
More athletic than May. Everybody's looking, thinking, is the 6th round guy better than the 1st round guy? PFF ranks New England's wide receiving core, all Belichick drafted, as 32nd.
32nd out of 32 teams, Pete.
All Belichick drafted as 25th. Their
running backs,
line
25th.
28. What does that tell you? That the 6th round quarterback, Joe Milton, is going to probably win the job because he's the athlete. He's the bigger, stronger, faster, more dynamic
Is
athlete.
he Tom Brady?
They don't have any wide receiver, tight end, and running back. Listen, Kirk Cousins and RG3 back in 2012 got drafted by Washington, and they figured out by year 2, Cousins is the guy. I think that's what we're looking at now. I don't think I'm overreacting.
I don't think he's overreacting either, Pete.
Not one bit. Not one bit. I mean, the reality is this. Drake May, I really liked him, John, his freshman year in college, North Carolina. The kid really stood out. 2nd year, not so much. And so everybody loved him, though. He's got good size. He's got all the different things that you'd want. I've loved Milton since he was at Michigan. Most people forget that he started there. He was at the University of Michigan. I saw him play just about 5 miles that way in the Gophers Stadium, where he lit us up and athletically ran up and down the field. And oh, by the way, that's not a slap at the Golden Gophers because this kid is an athlete, like he said. I mean, John, he's a good, solid 6'5", 6'6", which is unbelievable. He weighs about 255. He can run like a deer. He's built like an absolute Greek god. Now, do I think he was the best quarterback in the draft? Absolutely not. But should he have been in the 6th round? I mean, should he have dropped even out of the first 2 rounds? I don't think so. And he lit it up when he was, he had all of the street cred from Tennessee, and then he goes to the combine. He shows him what he's got. And for whatever reason, people just weren't as high on Milton. So if he beats him out, is he the next Tom Brady? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying that's kind of what Tom's story was. Tom thought he was going to go a hell of a lot higher than he did, and it went boom, 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 boom. And
he could be the next Purdy.
He could be Purdy. Last pick of the draft,
Mr. Irrelevant. Yeah. Back in the day, folks, they used to have 20 rounds in the NFL draft. They don't do that anymore. So 6th round means pretty much those are almost throwaway picks at that point, Pete. Now, I wasn't even drafted in the 6th, so I'm not, putting shade on these guys at all. No. I am just saying that This guy is pretty damn good. And just like Purdy got overlooked, I think Milton got overlooked. And I don't know why, Pete. But let's keep an eye on that kid.
I think it's going to be pretty exciting. Why don't we jump, John? I'm going to jump back to football since we're just finishing it anyway. And I'm going to go this way. College football. I was looking over at a few things that we're getting really close, so I'm getting really excited about it. Gophers are practicing right over here. Everybody's at practice now, and it's pretty exciting. We've got the season is not that far away, right? I took a look at who are the top 10 teams in all of the country right now in terms of ratings. Doesn't mean they're right, but preliminary, what does it look like? You've got Big Ten and SEC have got 8 of the top 10 positions there in those rankings. And I don't think very many people have an argument on why they were left out or why it's 8 of those 10. I think it makes a lot of sense when you look at it. Notre Dame slipped in at 7, Florida State slipped in at 10. So that's kind of where it stands. So that tells you a lot about the strength of those conferences. I think the Big 12 is getting overlooked, John, in a big way. And I will tell you this, I think a sleeper school team, however you want to frame it, these days you can call it a team. It ain't college anymore. These guys are bouncing around and doing whatever. It's not the same, man. They're getting paid, all of that. Utah. I look at Utah, I look at Kyle Willingham, John. The guy's got a 67% winning percentage as a head coach. He's been there. He was 10 years a defensive coordinator. Now it's something close to, I don't even know, close to 20 years as a head coach. And he's got his quarterback back. And he's got a monstrous, very physical offensive line. He's got good tight ends like they always have at Utah. He's got a nice running game as well. And the defense, he's a defensive coordinator formerly. The defense is pretty damn good. They did well in the Pac-12. He went to multiple Rose Bowls. I think that these guys could be a sleeper. They're new to the Big 12 from the Pac-12. It's going to be interesting to see how all of this shakes out, right? Over the first 2, 4, 6 weeks, 8 weeks of the season, we'll know a lot more. But I think Utah is kind of one of these sleepy teams that everybody's forgotten. And I also, John, that quarterback, he didn't even get to play last year. He got hurt very early in the season. He missed basically the entire season last year, Cameron Rising. He was great in the Rose Bowl. He was great as a player. He missed last year. I think this year, this kid's going to be able to show people on a national stage, hey, Utah's for real. What do you think? Is there a team that I'm missing or somebody that you like a little bit more maybe that could break into the top 10?
Pete, I always liked Missouri.
Yeah, me too.
Ever since they've turned that program around. And I like Kentucky. Yeah. Kentucky's got a really hard schedule, though. So if I had to pick one of those two, I think Kentucky's in the top 5 toughest schedules, Pete. So if I had to pick, I'd pick Missouri, the Tigers. Otherwise, I really like what Kentucky's doing. Most people have them somewhere between 35th and 40th best, but they could surprise, especially the way these conferences are realigned now. But like I say, it's that I'm not saying Missouri's got a cakewalk schedule, not at all.
They're in the SEC.
Yeah, but they've been there. This is not brand new to them, but they both have a tough road to hoe. So I'm not necessarily overturning Pete's ruling. I'm just saying 2 others to consider, Missouri and Kentucky.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Yeah, it's amazing, and I think you're dead balls on that one. I think I'll even throw in an Oklahoma State, and I'll throw a really far sleeper out there, Tulsa. Just keep an eye. People don't know that name. They will. Central Florida is another one. People have forgotten about them, John, but they're in the Big 12, by the way, and they have the money and they have the tools, and they are the only Big 12 school that's in the state of Florida. Anyway, all that being said, it's kind of that helps in recruiting and everything else. All right, Major League Baseball, John. I just thought I'd throw this one out at you. This is a combination of what you and I do. We both love sports. We both played sports at the professional level, the college level, and all of that. So I always kind of like looking at the sports and the financial piece of a lot of these things. So I'm looking at Mike Trout. So Mike Trout's great guy, right? Great player, probably at times in his career, probably the best player in baseball at the time. You know, I'm not saying all time, by the way. I'm just saying in that year. But John, the guy has played in 29 games this season. He's missed 382 games in 4 years. He He has played, he's played one game after the All-Star break in 3 of the last 4 years. One game. So I use that as a backdrop because he's also one of the highest paid guys in baseball, right? So some people are saying, well, he should just walk away, get away. He's got the injuries. He's got plenty of money. If he walked away, he'd be walking away from $180 million left on his contract. I don't think this guy's walking away. But I guess the question I'd throw to you, John, is this. Is baseball going to find themselves in a real heap of problems if they've got some of their biggest and best players, they have the injury bug, and all of a sudden they're having to pay guys that aren't even playing anymore, which we've already seen happen. But what do you think? I mean, are they going to be able to keep up with the money that they're spending, in other words? Do you think Major League Baseball can do that? TV, everything else?
Well, for the people that love baseball, and I am not one, but I loved playing the game, and I love playing softball. I don't love, even though they've sped the games up, Pete, there's only a couple teams that I'll watch.
Right.
But let me throw this out as an answer to you, Pete. The New York Mets, largest payroll in baseball. Total payroll, $315 million. You know how much of that is active players? $174 million. In other words, just over half is active roster. The rest, $47 million, is injured players. $87 million are retained players. So that's what Pete's talking about there, folks. You can drop down. I'll drop down to San Francisco, Pete. They have a $200 million payroll, total payroll. $135 million is active, $25 million inactive, $38 million retained. I mean, some of these teams, and again, here's the Dodgers. You mentioned Trout. $240 million is their payroll. 96 million. So, Pete, only 96 million is for the active players. 94 million are injured. 17 million retained. So at least they're not wasting too much of that money on the retained players. But yeah, if these people, Magic Johnson and the guys from Guggenheim Partners and so forth that own the LA Dodgers, if they weren't so rich, this would really hurt. But they pack them in the stadium. It's one of the reasons they were able to get one of the best players in baseball to play, even though he's not pitching. He's just designated hitter this year. But that's a huge payroll, $239 million, and only 96 million are active on the roster, Pete.
Yeah, pretty incredible. It really is. I know every year we say it, though. Well, the price is going to go up from TV. The price is going to go up from TV. At some point, that maybe stops. But so far, so good.
So far, so good. Well, folks, again, we have a special volatility summit tonight over at Market Rebellion. We will be talking about the carry trade. What is it? How did it break down? And did it come back? Or is it still going to take a while to play out? Warren Buffett, we're going to talk about him lightening up on $277 million worth of stock. He is the largest holders of T-bills in the world. 277 billion, by the way. I said million, billion. Largest holder of T-bills, bigger than the United States itself. We're going to talk about recession fears, best trades, volatility, 50 cent, all of that tonight, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Volatility War Room. Thank you, Jared, for that. Volatility War Room. Discover how to trade volatile markets, protect your portfolio. Like I say, 3,000 of you have already done it, 2,000 more, folks, and then we're done. But you get a copy of it if you attend. Or even if you can't attend. If you sign up, we'll send you a copy of the recording of the whole show. So check it out. And Pete and I will be back tomorrow. I will be in Grant Cardone's offices tomorrow, Pete, doing a special Rebel's Edge from there. So we'll see you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern time.